welcome everybody. Welcome to the opportunities of digital transformation for manufacturing and supply chain. My name is Mike Yost. I'll be the moderator of this session. I'm happy to be joined here by four panelists: Steve Pawlowski, sorry, Steve, the VP of Product Manager at GE Digital, Devin Sumaung, the Director of Supply Chain Transformation at the University of Washington, Jamshed Dubash, a Strategy Advisor at Momenta, and Marcelo Mendonça is a staff engineer, data analytics, manufacturing 4.0 at General Motors. Before we jump in and let the panelists introduce themselves, we'll just familiarize yourself with the environment we're in here. If you'll notice, there's chat that you can use to comment and post things. So if you want to familiarize yourself with that, go ahead, click the chat button. You can put your location in where you're listening in from anywhere in the world. Love to see that interaction. If you have specific questions for the panelists, then use the Q&A button. So we will be queuing up questions using that tool. We will not be able to monitor the chat for the questions. But if you have questions that you want to ask for any of the panelists or the whole panel, go ahead and use the Q&A button and we will monitor that. We're going to spend about the next 40 minutes or so talking through this topic, the opportunities of digital transformation, and then we will get to the questions at the end that you pose. And if there are questions that we're not able to answer that you raise, then the IoT World staff will find a way to answer those questions and get that information back to everybody. So we're going to be here with you for about the next hour. Looking forward to it. This would not be possible for us to do this without the support of our sponsors, and this session is sponsored by GE Digital. So thank you to the GE Digital team. So what I like to do is let everybody introduce themselves. And so maybe we'll just go left or right here and start with you, Steve. Just give a background on who you are, what your role is, what your perspective is in industry, and then maybe just a quick thought on the topic here. What broadly are the opportunities that you see personally from your experience and your vantage point for digital transformation for manufacturing and supply chain? Steve?
Hey, thanks, Mike. So again, Steve Pawlowski, I lead product management for GE Digital's manufacturing business. I've been with GE 36 and a half years now, always in the industrial space. I started off in the early days of HMI SCADA and have continued through, and it's really been quite the journey. And what fascinates me and excites me every day is how rapidly technology is evolving and helping our customers create value from the data that their plants and processes create. And that really aligns to our philosophy and our mission, which is helping customers drive productivity and enable their people and including for the planet, right? Our sustainability has become a key key emphasis for our customers, and we're looking at how we help our customers solve those problems as well. And really, I think sustainability and improving sustainability is one of those opportunities. Really, our focus is whether it be productivity, efficiency, quality, improvement on sustainability. How do we help customers achieve their goals through data and analytics? And so that to me is I think how we're excited about this topic and helping global customers solve those problems.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Steve. Devin, how about you?
Mike, thanks. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. My name is Devin Sumaung. I'm the Director of Supply Chain Transformation with the University of Washington. Also the president of the Western States Healthcare Materials Management Association. Been in supply chain my entire career, started in retail, roots there, last 10 years specifically in healthcare. I've dedicated the last 3 years to supply chain transformation. So really that's the review, redesign, implementation of technologies and different business processes, operating models, all that good stuff. It's a lot of fun. And I can tell you that some of the opportunities I see are implementing synergistic systems that drive processes to help us improve our bottom lines through optimized and transparent end-to-end processes, better predictive models, I think Steve hinted at that, to help reduce risk and increase customer, or in our case, patient loyalty and outcomes. Thanks.
Fantastic. Thank you, Devin. Marcelo, you are next on my screen. Would you introduce yourself?
Sure. Hello, everyone. First of all, thanks for the opportunity to be part of this panel today. My name is Marcelo Mendonça. I'm currently a staff engineer for Manufacturing 4.0 Data Analytics at General Motors. I've been in the manufacturing and data analytics industry for over 24 years, working in Brazil, Australia, Asia, and I'm here in Austin, Texas. In my current role, I'm acting as a bridge between the manufacturing operations in our technology groups as part of our Manufacturing 4.0 initiative, where we are using a lot of data to solve some of the most complex manufacturing problems. From the opportunities I see in manufacturing, there is a lot of opportunity to improve efficiency, increase OEE, improve throughput by increasing availability, using predictive maintenance as an example to eliminate unplanned downtime events. We also look at performance, right? When it comes to OEE, you have to consider performance, identifying slow cycles, small stops. Those are less obvious events that we have in manufacturing as compared to significant downtime events, but they can also significantly impact your throughput. And also from a quality perspective, right? Using predictive quality, can we detect that the machine is about to cause a quality problem in the process, or even prescriptive quality, where technology can suggest adjustments to the equipment in order to gain a percentage of first-time quality, as an example. So lots of opportunities using digital transformation in manufacturing for sure.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that, Marcelo. Jamshed, would you introduce yourself, please?
Thanks, Mike. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Saw some folks on the chat from Indonesia, India, all over the world. So fantastic. My name is Jamshed Dubash. I'm excited to be on this panel with my esteemed colleagues. And I'll share my experiences today with sort of the following lenses, if you will. I've got over 3 decades of experience that I bucket into 3 broad categories. The first, when I started my career for the first decade or so, I was in semiconductor manufacturing. So companies like Digital Semiconductor and Intel, that's my academic training to begin with. And then the second part, or the second decade, was in CPG, primarily with companies like Gillette and Procter & Gamble, working with retail companies, Walmart, Target, Tesco, Metro, Carrefour, etc. And I'll talk about the third decade or bucket, a decade plus. It's been more than 35 years since I've been in the workforce, but that's been in the startup world and in consulting. And the focus has been supply chain logistics, primarily in CPG, retail, and pharma. I have done 2 startups of my own, and most recently I worked with a company called TraceLink in pharma supply chain, and now with Momenta. The common thread in all of this has been technology and business value creation. I am a big believer in this concept of and, A-N-D, and. So the idea of making money and doing good for people, for the environment, for the planet. This is something I've believed in a long time, and I'm really passionate about ESG, green tech, etc. So some of the things that I think Steve had touched on. One quick sentence about Momenta. We help senior leaders in global industries accelerate their product and service digital transformations with things like digital strategy, M&A, technology assessment, market analysis, venture building. I personally, in terms of opportunities, from especially the Momenta lens, there's many, but in digital transformation and industrial manufacturing, we're focused at energy manufacturing, smart supply, supply chain, and transportation. But I personally really will focus today on supply chain and sort of the opportunities there that I see, both in terms of sort of food loss and pharma. So that's sort of the focus I think I'm going to try and focus on today.
Excellent. Well, I appreciate that. And I think everybody can see from a panelist perspective, we have a lot of experience represented here to talk today, a lot of different industries represented, supply chain and manufacturing. So I think it's going to be a great conversation. To the point Jamshed mentioned, just checking out the chat, the people from Bulgaria, Indonesia, Egypt, Nepal, Greece, New York, all over the world. So obviously this is a really important topic. It's very broad and has a lot of potential reach. So what we've done here as a group we've put together sort of a framework to drive our conversation here today. And I would just like to remind everybody again that if you're going to ask a question you would like the panelists to respond to, please use the Q&A feature, not the chat feature. So we're going to talk in about a couple different buckets. We're going to talk strategy and leadership, operations excellence and culture, supply chain resilience and agility, people optimization, data-driven processes, and then systems, infrastructure, and integration. And that's a framework that I like to leverage. It's actually created by the the U.S. National Institute on Smart Manufacturing. They use that to drive a conversation for manufacturers around their approach to digital transformation or smart manufacturing. So I think it gives us a good framework here. So basically, I just want to sort of introduce the topic area and then let the panelists chime in. So Jamshed, how about if we start with you, the first area to dive into strategy and leadership. And from my perspective, this is what gets me most excited about where we are today, talking transformation, talking Industry 4.0, all these technologies, is what are the new business models, business opportunities, new mindset, things like that folks that you see from an opportunities perspective, these technologies and this time is opening up to us.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Let me start the conversation with a few numbers just to sort of throw some of these out there again. The market numbers, they vary drastically, but and then I'll give a little perspective, but then certainly the panel and the team can jump in, right? So one number that was pretty compelling was that an IDC report that just came out about digital transformation being 3.4 trillion by 2026. I mean, this is a huge number. Maybe it's there's double counting, but even if we cut it in half, it's still a very significant number, right? But as I was going to talk about supply chains, and I wanted to put a little bit of context to some of these numbers, right? So global annual GDP is close to 90 trillion. I actually used ChatGPT this morning to check, and the number is 87 trillion. If you guys haven't used ChatGPT as yet, I'd be surprised because most of the people on here are sort of in this space, but certainly worth getting an account in there and working and playing in there. It's pretty mind-boggling in terms of what's happening there. In terms of that 90 trillion of global GDP, supply chain costs are estimated to be about 10% of that, so about 9 trillion annually. And again, I think pharma, food, and those are the two that I'm sort of most interested in. I believe can have some massive impact. So to get to the strategy and leadership point that you talked about. I think we've done some recent studies, and we've found that in terms of the most advanced plants that are out there, I mean, digital transformation today still in manufacturing is at a very small percentage, right? Less than 10% by some measure of plants are digitized. But what we're finding is in terms of advanced plants, the ones that are really getting value from Industry 4.0, the two key dimensions that are most relevant are leadership and digital organization. So specifically, Mike, the topics that you're identifying. So let me talk about those two very quickly. Leadership really, the thing we found that was, what you need in place are policies that inspire, support, and accelerate digital transformation across the plant. These are, preconditions that are sort of necessary for success. So what does that mean? Three specific things that I'd mention here. One is having an enterprise-wide Industry 4.0 strategy. So this can't be in small buckets and little hidden processes. It needs to be thought through about the enterprise. There needs to be a centralized Industry 4.0 program office. So the ones that are again successful have these program offices that bring things together and allow you to work across the different organizations. And then the third is we find in these organizations really that cultivate the right leadership behaviors. So leadership behaviors like, fail fast, allow people to try new things, have an agile mindset, move quickly, work in sprints and in increments as opposed to this long drawn out, and do continuous experimentation with new technologies. So leadership, again, one of the key dimensions. And then the second dimension that we recognized from the study was that the digital organization, the structures that you need to put in there are really important. So for success for Industry 4.0. So systemic problem solving capabilities is extremely important. Another one that I thought was really interesting was having a fully integrated IT/OT team with clear rules and governance. So this whole challenge of silos across the organization, across data, has to be upfront and as an organization need to be thought about. And then having centers of excellence that can really look at all this data that's being generated and get value out of it. So those were the two key themes that I think we saw as we did this exercise. And I'll open it up to the group to add more to this.
Yeah, Steve, you want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, hey, Jamshed, really interesting perspective. I think an additional sort of data point, as you talked about that requirement for aligned IT and OT. Recently I was talking with one of the Gartner analysts, and Gartner does a periodic survey of both operational leadership and IT leadership. And what they have finally seen is an alignment as we think about deploying level 3 and level 4 technology, sort of data collection and manufacturing execution system type applications within the sort of Purdue model, right? That the decision making has both the operational organization and the IT organization agree finally that IT kind of has the lead in that decision-making process. And I think it's because of the understanding of the enterprise impact, right, that these decisions have on these organizations. And so I think there's an interesting sort of alignment there with your notion of sort of enterprise-wide vision and the need for alignment between the OT and the IT organizations. There's been sort of a cultural shift where this is headed now, where IT is leading that decision making. I'd be interested if other folks on the panel have thoughts on that.
Yeah, Devin or Marcelo, is there anything you wanted to add in here?
Yeah, Marcelo,
I agree. I was just going to say, I agree with the perspective on the leadership engagement, right? Not only to define the strategy, but once you have a solution development, is to help the teams on in case of manufacturing on the plant floor to really embrace the technology and adapt and adjust to the new way of doing business. So that comes from the top leadership to support this new way of operating. And that's where we see most of the value.
just to take a little bit of a different stance there, I do agree that with IT leadership playing a larger role in some of the decision making, as far as it comes to like a longer term roadmap, but at the same time, if that partnership around making informed decisions based on operational feedback to inform those requirements and ensure that hey, not only starting off in the right direction, but along the journey, they're able to continuously meet operational requirements. That's one thing that I think is critical, because I've seen too many examples where sometimes the technology isn't built in a way that can best support frontline operations, just because they might have been missing a few different requirements, and weren't able to optimally design for that stuff. So just to throw in my 2 cents there.
Yeah, well, I think that's great input, and it actually leads right into the second area we wanted to talk about, as far as the culture and commitment to operations excellence and such. And Marcelo, I was going to ask you, you mentioned being the liaison, between the business and manufacturing and technology. So as Devin talked about, actually using data to drive decision making, problem solving, things like that. Maybe comment a bit on the importance of that, or the opportunity that you see in that area to drive culture, drive improvement.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Mike. Yeah, in my opinion, what I'm calling this is kind of the last mile in the digital transformation journey, which is where you take the technology and you need to finally implement in production for operations, is where some of the challenges are, right? So the digital transformation requires a significant change in the way organization operates. So you may have in your organization the most sophisticated end of sophisticated technology, state-of-the-art technology, but if you don't manage to fully integrate that with your existing operations, with your existing processes, you would definitely struggle with that. So what we are seeing is, if you think about existing operations where you have, let's say, maintenance teams, when we talk about predictive maintenance, they already have processes well established where they work on corrective maintenance items, preventative maintenance items. And then you come with your digital transformation, and now you have way more insights, right? So you find way more things that they can work on to improve the process. It's a challenge for those teams to have to go yet to another system or user interface. They are very, very busy in their daily operations. So this integration of those new insights with existing processes, so rather than asking them to go to this new system, what if you could simply open a ticket automatically with digital transformation? So it's basically integrating. You have this new way of identifying opportunities in your operations, but once that's done, you just basically move that to the existing process. And the other aspect to that is also working with the plant floor teams on the standardization of their processes. So there are rules or roles well defined in the manufacturing operations. Typically, people would have resistance to change, right? Saying, "Oh, you want me to do yet more work with this new technology?" It's not more work. It's a different way of doing work. It's a more efficient way of doing work rather than chasing problems to solve. The tool is telling you, you can fix these because you're going to improve your throughput, or you're going to improve your quality. So it may sound more like a burden at first, more work to do, but in the long term, that's where the results and the value is going to be. So the operations piece is critical in this digital transformation journey, as important as the technology itself, right?
Right, for sure. For sure. And I think that Steve or Jamshed, did you have anything that you wanted to add to there? Because that leads right into the next area we're going to talk about, supply chain resiliency, but I want to give you the chance to.
Well, I think I would say, I think there was some, and I know there's a future topic later in the morning about, employees and engagement there, right? I think that notion of technology merging and I think Marcelo used the word digital transformation. I think there's an interesting element here it's such a generic term. It's also important for customers to actually have, or companies to have, an actual vision as to what does that mean for them, right? What's their desired outcome? I was, talking with a customer recently, and they had a very clear definition. It was, for them, it was about sort of connected worker plus predictive analytics, right? That was their vision of what digital transformation was. But that may not be the same for, for every company. Marcelo, it aligned in many ways with what you talked about, right? How do you bring the results of those new analytic capabilities and make it simple for that user to take advantage of that through some level of integration, right? But I do think that there's an interesting perspective there on people talking about digital transformation, and are they actually clear on what they're talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess the key thing is you should provide the insights, the results of the analytics to the right people at the right time, in the right way. Either that is going to be a pager or text message or email or a UI. You have different users consuming the technology, right? We see, and that's something we are working on. We are trying to map different audiences and what their pain points are, what their needs are, and then we tailor the way that we interact with them in different ways. So if you think about a SME, a subject matter experts, this person would definitely want to engage in more advanced analytics to explore data, explore the results. But like I was saying before, a person on the assembly line doesn't really care about dashboards and all the details. It's just, should I work on this or not? That kind of thing. So tailoring the insights or the solutions to the right audience is also very important.
Yeah, Mike, I'll jump in just for a quick. The other dimension I'd add here is, and I think both Steve and Marcelo have absolutely touched on this, but is cultural change, right? So I think any of these sort of digital transformation, there's obviously technology and you can make lots of investments there, et cetera. But unless you really take care of the culture and the behavior change, I think I recently read I think it was the Oracle CEO that said something like the hardest thing about digital transformation isn't the technology, it's the sociology, right? Yeah. So it is about getting the people involved and making them feel comfortable with it, exactly what Marcelo was talking about. And that's the only way you're going to get the real value. And so I think that's a key element in this piece.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And actually, let's just stick with people for a second. We'll go a little out of order what we were planning on. Maybe Steve, if you want to chime in on this, but this opportunity to empower employees, Marcelo talked about the workers, giving them insights, things like that. And I think we've sort of naturally through this conversation already highlighted that point. And actually, the first question that came in through the question Q&A was, what about people? So why don't we kick that around here for a minute?
No, I think it's such an important topic. I recently participated in another panel discussion that was hosted by the U.S. National Association of Manufacturing, and some really fascinating things are going on today in manufacturing that people aren't necessarily aware of, right? There are 800,000 open positions in manufacturing in North America today. That is estimated to become 3 million open positions in manufacturing by 2030, right? And manufacturers today are struggling to close that employment gap. And a big piece of it is the perception of manufacturing and how do we get young people into manufacturing while we have the aging out of the employees that have 20, 30 years of experience, right? So there's a very interesting element here of how technology gets applied into manufacturing to sort of make manufacturing cool for the next generation of operators and people coming into the factory floor, while also providing a framework for capturing much of that, either capturing much of that sort of historical knowledge that the folks that are retiring out of manufacturing are taking with them, or through analytic technology able to derive those insights, because the employee doesn't necessarily, the new employees don't have the sort of the years of experience that would help them sort of innately, try to figure out what's going on. So, the people piece is a really big deal, and it's both, enabling this newer generation with technology that's unlike what they're used to using in their daily life, but also augmenting this younger generation of workers with the results of, say, analytic technologies, or to help backfill the experiential data that's walking out the door.
Excellent. Yeah, I think there's a book that I like called The Technology Fallacy, how people are the real key to digital transformation. And I think that certainly rings true. And a lot of the conversation to this point has been manufacturing centric. That's my background, and that's obviously where Marcelo sits and such. But I think one of the areas that we wanted to touch on was the supply chain aspect. Supply chain resilience and agility is really being a critical piece to the transformation overall. So I thought maybe we could throw it back over to Devin as our one of our supply chain folks on the call here, and just your thoughts. Certainly you can comment on the people side as well if you like, Devin, but your thought, because I think that what we're talking about here from an opportunity perspective is to drive the reliability of your operations to the point where you become a critical element and understand your fit in your customer supply chains. And a lot of that has to do with the things we've been discussing so far, as well as your ability to share insights and information with your supply chain partners. So I guess your thoughts on that area.
Yeah, thanks. Let's see, just circling back to the people side and what Marcel and Steve were talking about, Jamshed, about the informed analytics and helping to basically support those either frontline teams or the management teams. And some of the stuff that we worked on earlier on was identifying some of those pain points where you either had to merge multiple reports, or the interpretation of those reports might not be digestible for all levels of staff. So in creating dashboards and other reporting tools, we're able to generate things to help direct those teams where they don't have to try to decipher or play detective and figure out where they need to allocate their time, but creating dashboards and reports to actually direct people and prescribe people to, this is where you should spend the majority of your time to either ramp up production, reduce disruption, or allocate time to customer support. So just some cool stuff there, and I could talk about that later. But before I got into the topic around supply chain resiliency, I thought it would be beneficial to provide some insight into the healthcare supply chain specifically. So one of the main challenges within healthcare supply chain is how critical supplies can be for our patients or customers, right? Why? So an easy way to think about this is, if someone needed life-saving surgery, you can't start a surgery without anesthesia, and you can't start anesthesia without the supplies and medication. And that critical nature of the supplies is one of the things that also makes me strongly identify with this role, to basically just be involved in healthcare, not directly but indirectly through supply chain. So transitioning to the topic around supply chain resiliency, like many of us after the pandemic, our roles significantly shifted. Where we are trying to improve upon what has been considered the status quo for the last 20 years, like just in time, right? Lean manufacturing, all that good stuff. It still works, but I think we need to tweak it just a little bit. So we're looking at having the supply chain be a little bit more elevated as strategic partners to ensure business continuity and resilience to macro events and everything else in between. So shifting to now interconnected cloud-based applications, there's this huge emphasis on this, where organizations can get more accurate data faster and enhance our ability to steer procurement or production decisions, This technology can also help for solving supply disruptions before they happen. So, Marcel talked about predictive maintenance. Well, we're looking at, better predictive, forecasting, better predictive models to understand where we could have some pain points before they happen, hopefully address them by putting in either substitutions or different or building out different sourcing models to connect with either a more robust amount of suppliers, or whatever that might look like. But just as kind of a starting point, circling back to the people side of things, the right foundation needs to be put in place. So what I've seen is multiple organizations are either looking to hire or have already restructured their teams to include more emphasis on supply chain risk management, as well as data analytics and ramping that up. And the step after the people is to ensure that the right technology is in place. So usually starting with some form of ERP, whether it's your WMS, MMIS, and then branching out from there to ensure that you have the connected systems, whether it's what you're using to manage your staff in HR, to production, to payroll, to whatever that might be. Oh, Mike, I think you're on mute.
All right, moderator lesson 101. Sorry about that. Appreciate that. And what we want to do is make this as interactive as possible. And we do have a bunch of questions that are flowing in. And I think we'll weave back into the other areas, because the last two areas that we'd framed up to talk about were, data-driven processes and the systems infrastructure, more of the technology kind of stuff. So I think we can get to that with the questions that I see rolling in here. So one other thing to
Mike,
note,
there is a question which talks about, organizations that have not embarked on Industry 4.0 and major changes in alignment and strategy. And I think that actually aligns to what Devin was just talking about in the case of supply chain, raising visibility of supply chain in the organization, and along with combining with technology to help drive visibility to the critical nature of supply chain, enabling the enterprise to reach its goals, right? I mean, we can't produce product without inbound raw material, right? We don't generate revenue without shipping and getting product to our customers in a way that they'll then pay, right? So I think supply chain does provide that critical element, and I think there's an element here of visibility in the organization. A lot of companies now have supply chain leadership that's at this effectively tied into the C-suite. But I think that notion of supply chain as an organization that needs the same level of technology that we may be thinking about from a manufacturing or even from a product development perspective, I think is an interesting sort of cross concept.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Steve. And I think we should go there and talk about the organizational side of things if there's more to add. Just one thing I wanted to note, I got a note from the IIoT World folks that they are to encourage everybody using this Q&A and putting questions in here and contributing to the conversation. They are willing to give away a 1-year IIoT World VIP community membership. It's normally a $995 fee. So anybody who puts relevant questions into the Q&A here and contributes to this dialogue will have the opportunity for one of those memberships. So I think that's a great point, Steve, and we'll throw it out to the others. Your thoughts. The question specifically is what if the organization has not embarked on this transformation, then they're starting to align teams first. What major change of alignment strategy is expected in organizations to be aware of as they get started? So obviously you guys live this, so your thoughts from an organizational side of things.
So I'll jump in for a second, Mike, and can we ask questions and get that IIoT?
Absolutely, as long as you use the Q&A feature, not in the chat.
Yeah, so a couple of things, right? One was, I took a couple of notes while Devin was talking. In terms of sort of the pharma supply chain, and and the question that Stephen asked, or some of the audience asked, I'm not looking at those questions. First of all, when we're doing this transformation, we're talking about manufacturing, and those are nodes, right? So there's the manufacturing facility, the distribution facilities, the consumption facilities, but really the value is not just getting visibility at those nodes, is also getting visibility across that network, right? And getting it not just after the fact, when like Devin was saying, if you don't have the anesthesia, you can't get, knowing it before it's going to happen is the critical piece, right? So this whole push about real-time visibility in supply chain. So again, it's a little bit different than the problem where people haven't started. But as you go up that maturity curve, getting to that real-time visibility within supply chains, I believe, is where the biggest value and the biggest bang for the buck is. On the pharma supply chain topic, again, wanted to just point out one topic that I'm really passionate about. There was a gentleman who was in this industry, just a mention of his name, Roddy Martin, and I assume people on this chat might know him. He brilliant mind, really real visionary, and he was always pushing this concept of outside in terms of supply chain, right? So looking at in the pharma context in terms of a patient-centric model. So start there and then work back in. So exactly sort of building to Devin's point there, but. I did want to mention his name because he's just a brilliant gentleman who added a lot of value to the supply chain world and where we are today. So,
Marcelo, I mean, you again mentioned that you're the liaison, so you've been through the organizational evolution, I guess, over your career. Any thoughts to the question on the organizational pieces and alignment?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the notion of a digital transformation needs to be based on the type of problem you're trying to solve. You don't do a digital transformation if you don't have a problem. What's the point? Or otherwise it's just hype, right? So I think the very first thing to consider is what really is the problem that your organization has. So once you understand that, basically go to the plant floor, go to your supply chain facilities, talk to people, engage with stakeholders, and really understand what's going on, what the pain points are, and then you go from there, frame the digital transformation solution based on the type of problem you're trying to solve, and stay away from hypes and technology A, technology B. We're gonna put artificial intelligence, we're gonna put digital twins, and we're gonna put all this, but what for, right? What really is the purpose of that? So I guess from a strategic perspective, thinking about aligning those problems, aligning those opportunities with this bigger picture, like Jamshed mentioned at the beginning, to have this centralized notion of your entire manufacturing or supply chain operations, and where you can really improve, create this single long-term strategy and vision, that's definitely going to help you, and then you go from there.
Another component of that is understanding what your roadmap and timeline is, because you could go big bang across the organization if that's something that you can handle, and if you already have like integrated systems. But usually, it's going to be a longer term process. You're looking at 5 to 10 years of transformation activity. There's going to be small wins along the way to help reduce cost and improve operating efficiencies, but over that 10-year period, there are studies that are showing a 10, 15, sometimes much higher reduction in operating costs through digital transformation that can help justify say budget allocation to support the plan.
Thank you for that. Devin, I want to stick with you for a second because there's a great question in here that I think everybody can weigh in on, but it's aimed at your hospital experience. It says, why is it so hard for the hospital to know where the anesthetics are when I know exactly where my t-shirt that I ordered from a guy in his basement is at all time?
That's a great question. Yeah.
That's
So
perfect,
let's
right?
back up 10 years. So for whatever reason, and it's not like this today, but for whatever reason, the healthcare supply chain has been, just behind the times in traditional supply chain practices. So there was always the concept of lean or, just in time and other different, process improvement methodologies implemented, but the emphasis really had not started in full until probably 2010 is when supply chain started to get elevated at first, where they were starting to be looked at as those strategic partners within the organization to help drive down the cost to serve our communities and patients. Because one of the next largest things are areas of expense after people is, the supply expense. Supplies and medication are really expensive in healthcare. The reasoning why supply disruption had sometimes been just really, I would say, messy within the supply chain is because the data wasn't there to help steer and understand what was happening with all the different supplies. So you could very well have stuff on hand, but you might not know where it is and someone has to go look for it. They're also, bringing the skeletons out of the closet now, but like there were all sorts of different areas where the supply chain could be improved through that advanced reporting. Another thing was ensuring that the teams are embracing the technology that they were given. I've seen all sorts of different levels of technology adoption where sometimes like the WMS wasn't fully optimized and, forecasting couldn't happen accurately because the stock on hand levels were a mess and cycle counting wasn't implemented and people were doing requisitioning with pen and paper. And a lot of that has been rooted out, but I'm still surprised every time I hear about it. Shouldn't be, but every time I hear about paper requisitioning, somewhere throughout the world, I'm like, oh, hey, there's another one. We need to help them. And the technology can be expensive to implement. So hopefully at some point down the road that cost is going to continue to be driven down.
Devin, as
Yeah.
I listen to you, what I sort of translate that in what you just said is, people have, applied tools and technologies appropriate to solve the problem that they understand. Meaning, you talk about prior to 10 years ago, if everything was just in time, right? The focus was on cost, not on risk, right? And so I think the question is, right, in your world, right, how did supply chain risk, or how did they get to the sort of hairy edge in terms of managing through just in time? And then what was the disruption that then created risk as the problem to be solved? And then, yeah, it's taken a long time for culturally the organizations to make that jump.
Yeah, just in time is still a critical strategic, way we distribute. But there is more emphasis on, transparency into on-hand levels. So now, we have a really good understanding of consumption rates, on-hand levels, lots of different processes in place, but all these different best practices that, we share between retail and manufacturing and across, all those different areas of operations just needs to be continued to be rolled out. And have people that are, thinking strategically how to best influence, their teams to adopt these either best practices or layers of technology to help, to help overall improve their operating efficiencies within the supply chain.
So we have about 10 minutes left, guys. And Devin, when you talked about the, I forget the exact phrase you used about being behind as far as having visibility into processes and operations. As a manufacturing guy, I thought, well, yeah, you talk about behind, right? There's a lot of challenges with getting information out of the plant floor and such. And so there's several questions really around technology. And I thought maybe Marcelo, you could talk to, the question is to please highlight one or two major technical and administrative challenges with integrating IT and OT, so the plant floor and the business systems.
Hey, Mike, before we go there, quickly on the last one, it's just two relevant points, and I promise to be quick. One was, I think the pharma has been very compliance driven and is now moving to value driven sort of business models. So that's a big, the last 15 plus years have been about DSCSA, EU, FMD, et cetera, all about pharma tracking as it sort of goes around, and it's been mandated. This sort of Amazonification, if you want to call it that, right, of knowing where everything is, the whole real-time piece is happening much faster in CPG and retail than it is happening in other industries. But that was a very relevant question, and the change that is happening in pharma that Devin talked about and Stephen talked about is happening, but it's happening slowly, just because making change in pharma is really, really difficult, and for good reason. I mean, your people's lives are at stake, so you really need lots of data to do that. That's all transforming because of COVID and all the things that were discussed, but I wanted to bring up those 2 points. So thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely. Marcelo, your thoughts on the challenges of this connectivity?
Yeah, absolutely, Mike. So one of the challenges with the IT/OT integration is the identification of devices. So when we think about, that's one of the challenges. There are multiple, obviously, but when you think about you're going for a digital transformation, you're putting a lot of IoT devices on your plant floor. One thing that's a challenge is basically you have existing systems in your plant. Let's say your asset management tool. You have listed all the devices in there, but they're not necessarily talking the same language or identified in the same way as sensors on the floor. So in order to paint a complete picture of your process. Let's say you have a operation station there where you have a robot, you have cylinders, you have sensors, you have vision cameras doing quality inspection. When you're trying to do analytics and really solve a problem and optimize that station, you need to connect all those dots. And these data points, they're coming from different sources, right? You have the time series data from the sensor, you have the image data coming from the camera, you have all those different data points, and you also have your maintenance system, asset management system. So the integration of those data points is one challenge that we have in terms of IT and OT integration.
Excellent. Excellent. Just pouring through these, there's a lot of different good questions here. One question was that I wanted to get to. People were asking about, seems to be a lot of folks that are trying to sort of get their arms around things. And we haven't really we've talked broadly about technologies, but not specifically about any technologies. So there is a question of, as we're talking about this, what are some examples of technologies that are helping to drive digital transformation? Anybody care to start with that? Throw out some of the tech.
I'll let someone else speak, and then I can jump in, or I can jump in first if you want, Mike.
You
Want to
jump.
talk about ERPs, Jamshed?
I think no ERPs. We're talking about from a tech. I'm taking the angle of the sensor position and sort of the different technologies there. So I mean, ERPs and these things are understood, right? But I think at the end of the day, two things on tech that I think are really important. One is sensorization, right? That I think is critical, and that's happening again, albeit at a slow pace. The more advanced factories are doing a better job of that than others. But then the other thing that I really think is interesting, and specifically, you know, there's some really interesting things happening with BLE and RFID and you know, things beyond just barcodes but any form of digitization sort of moves you up that curve, right? And then each of these different technologies have different capabilities and different value that can be added. Again, I'm talking, you know, the sensor level rather than at the ERP level. But the thing that I like at the data level is this idea of API standardization, right? So there's we really are in a situation where we have to talk about co-opetition, where by you know, being in a situation where all boats rise, you're much better off than trying to do this very little differentiation between one company and the other, and sort of fight it out there. And I'm seeing some good things happening there. So two examples again in the pharma supply chain for broadly. There's a company called Convoy that's starting something called Freight API. No interest from me personally. We're not working with this company, but they're focusing on a very sort of simple problem about pickup and delivery appointments. And in supply chain, this is a big problem. And so they've partnered with JP Hunt and I believe Uber Freight to start bringing these efficiencies in there, right? Another company called Tide started, and full disclosure, I'm an advisor to them. They started this thing called Open Visibility Network, and the idea there was to work with competitors to start standardizing on APIs to share information so that it becomes much more efficient going forward. So those are a couple of the things that I wanted to point out in terms of tech.
Yeah, I would just weigh in there. I mean, Jamshed talked about sensorization. I think one of the things that one of the technologies that is helping accelerate value creation from that sensor data is the ability to relatively easily today bridge from the OT space to the cloud, which then opens up the availability of using cloud-based AI and ML-based workloads against that sensor data, especially to help enterprise customers compare operations across plants to drive efficiency at the cross plant level, whether that be efficiency for pure efficiency or quality metrics or sustainability metrics, right? They can understand
Absolutely.
what's their best in class plant versus what's happening at the rest of the plants, and strive to bring the rest of the plants up to their entitlement level.
And real quick, I know we are short on time. One technology that I believe is important as well is the self-service analytics capabilities. So basically empowering your SMEs, the experts in your industry, to combine their domain knowledge with all this data that we're collecting from the sensors to really drive decisions and helping them to do problem resolution, drive design of future equipment and future processes using that data. So this combination of this extensive domain knowledge with the data, with the ability to do self-service analytics is extremely powerful.
Certainly is. Appreciate that. Appreciate the insights here. We are just about out of time here, probably not enough to delve into another topic area or question. So there's one statement that was put in the Q&A versus a question that I thought would be good as we close out the technology discussion to close on here. And it was says, let the business lead the tech, not the tech lead the business. You may not know you have a problem, but bringing in and visualizing data with multiple data sets is the best first step. So I think there's a lot of truth to that. It resonates with a lot of what we discussed here today. And I think it's probably a really good place for us to leave the conversation at this point. So I guess, does anybody have maybe one last final opportunity that you didn't get to highlight today that you wanted to throw out from any of our panelists?
I think in summary, right, all of us are actively working in this space. The technology has matured, right? So organizations ought to be thinking about organizational strategy. The technology can be deployed at enterprise scale. So don't be today thinking about just sort of dipping your toe in and doing little pilots. Be thinking about a broad strategy and where this technology could take you.
Excellent. Thanks for that, Steve. Anybody else to add on to that?
Yeah, I'll just add on by saying, it doesn't have to be all greenfield. It can be brownfield. Pull out a certain section within your brownfield, figure it out, and then learn how to sort of scale and move that forward. So I completely agree with Stephen. You need to think broadly about this, but start with an opportunity and make it grow.
Outstanding. Well, I appreciate that. I appreciate everybody's time, all the participants from all around the world, our panelists with their expertise and their willingness to contribute to this discussion. Personally, I believe this is the way that we all learn together and by sharing like this. So I think it is just fantastic. Would like again to thank GE Digital as the sponsor of this session, and thank the attendees for listening in and contributing. And so now we are going to transition out of this session into the next session, which will be industrial IoT architecture, how to tap into the full potential. So thank you, everybody, and have a wonderful day.